عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Ask Allah to make this a beneficial sitting where we are studying the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in this collection of Imam Nawawi, which is his book known as Arba'in Nawawi, Nawawi's 40 Hadith. And we have reached Hadith number 31 from his collection of a hadith, and hadith number 31 is on the authority of Abu Abbas Sahal bin Sa'd as-Sa'idi radiyallahu anhu, who said, "Ja rajul ila nabi," a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, "Ya Rasulullah, teach me about an action, if I was to do it, Allah will love me and the people will love me." So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Izhid fi dunya," forsake the dunya, yuhibbukallah, and Allah will love you. وَإِسْهِدْ فِي مَا عِنْدَ النَّاسِ, and if you forsake what people have, yuhibbuk النَّاسِ, and then people will love you also. So what we learn from this hadith is the Prophet ﷺ giving instruction for a person to strive for the Akhirah. The person came to ask him, what is there something that I could do that I would become beloved to Allah, and people won't see any fault in me also. So the Prophet ﷺ told him, if you forsake what's in the dunya, and if you forsake having any connection to people because of material gain, then the people will love you. Allah says in the Quran in many places to seek the Akhirah. Many people want to seek the dunya, but the Akhirah is better and everlasting. But here we have a concept which is the concept of Zuhd. What is Zuhd, and what are the levels of Zuhd, and how can we attain Zuhd? And this is something where the Prophet ﷺ is referred to here as fi dunya, have Zuhd and forsake the dunya. But what is Zuhd? And it's been translated here as being forsakement, but even that it doesn't really capture the idea of what Zuhd is. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, rahimahullah, in his explanation, said that all Muslims have some level of Zuhd, because Zuhd is to seek the Akhirah. Zuhd is to seek the Akhirah, and it's not to forsake the dunya. And this has become a common understanding of the principle of what a pious Muslim should be, is that he should forsake the dunya and not have any enjoyment within it, and not seek any wealth within it and the likes. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said Zuhd is to seek the Akhirah, and that could mean that you are wealthy in the dunya, it could mean that you have a lot of provisions in the dunya. It doesn't necessarily mean that you forsake the dunya as it's been translated here, but your attachment is for the Akhirah. So whatever you have in this dunya, either you will do it to seek for the Akhirah, or you'll abstain from it for the sake of the Akhirah. Ibn Rajab also then goes on to mention that Zuhd is of two types. Zuhd is of two types. Zuhd is to leave something in the dunya for the sake of the Akhirah. And this is what he has just talked about then. But he also said Zuhd also talks about leaving what people have. Leaving what people have, the materialistic attachment with people. So you compare yourself to people, or you look at other people and you want what they have, and you start competing. So Zuhd is of two levels that the Prophet ﷺ is guiding us to here. He's saying, number one, leave the dunya and seek Allah's Akhirah. But also, whilst you're in the dunya, leave the dunya that the people have with themselves and seek the Akhirah for yourself. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said that the first one, like we said, everyone has an idea of that. People have come to the masjid, leaving their homes, leaving their dinner, leaving their families, and seeking the Akhirah. They pray 4 rakats and they go. But the second one, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah saying, is extremely difficult, and not many people have this one. Therefore, the explanation of this hadith, he goes on, and it's quite lengthy, his explanation of this hadith, to be honest, and he goes on and he talks about both types of zuhd. The first one is where we are asking the question, are you satisfied with what Allah has prepared for those people who do good in the Akhirah? Or do you want that to be hastened whilst you are in the dunya? That's the concept of Zuhd. The Prophet ﷺ is saying, forsake the world and Allah will love you. That's your choice now. Or do you want to prefer what you create with your own two hands and what is limited, and seek the enjoyment that you have here? Ibn Rajab said, rahimahullah, that true Zuhd is to prefer Allah's reward over anyone or anybody possesses in the dunya. And this is now talking about what Allah can give, not you competing. Is that you have a choice. Do you want Allah to give you here, or do you want Allah to give you in the Akhirah? Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said that true Zuhd is to prefer the reward of Allah in the Akhirah. And then he quotes many statements from the Salaf in talking about this thing. And then there's an interesting one here from Yunus ibn Maysara, one of the Salaf rahimahullah. And he said, and he summarized Zuhd in seeking the Akhirah as having three aspects to it. And he said all of them, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said, all of them are connected to your heart and to your actions. So it's internal and external. The first one is to trust Allah more than you trust yourself. So when you leave something in the dunya and prefer in the Akhirah, you are placing a level of trust in Allah that Allah will replace something better for you in the Akhirah. That you have something in store which is better for you in the Akhirah. Do you want to do something which is haram and gain that level of enjoyment here, or do you want it in Akhirah? You do it out of trust of Allah. The second thing, or the second aspect that Yunus ibn Maysar was talking about, is that you fear a punishment of Allah. Now this fearing of punishment can occur in times of difficulty, but the true person who has Zuhd will have that fear also at the time of ease. It's very easy for you to fear Allah when you see something bad in front of you, or when you're going through a hard time. But Zuhd here, like Ibn Rajab is explaining, is fearing Allah is in both states, in times of ease and in times of difficulty. And the third aspect, so the first aspect is to trust Allah more than you trust yourself. The second one is that you fear a punishment from Allah in both times of ease and in difficulty. And the third one, and this is extremely important also, and one that is very difficult to master, as Ibn Rajab has mentioned previously in his explanation here, is that whether a person says good things about you or they say bad things about you, it is irrelevant to you because of your level of Ikhlas with Allah. A person might come and say, look at this man, he's got a beard but he's cheated me and he did this and he did that, he's not really pious, be wary of him. That will not affect you in the slightest. And also a person might see you and say, oh look at you, you're such a nice man, you pray 5 times a day and you're very generous, you're very kind. None of that will deter you, and none of that will make you any better or any less with Allah and your connection with Him. This is the idea of Zuhd that Yunus ibn Maysara was talking about. Then he quotes another statement also from Hasan al-Basri. He said, "Inna min da'fi yaqinik." He said, from the weakness of your trust in Allah and your certainty that you have with Allah is that you put a level of trust with the creation, and you forsake bima fi yadillah, that you forsake what is with Allah in the Akhirah. And again, this is something where many people are living in the dunya today, and they are competing with one another, and you find the houses of Allah empty because people are chasing the dunya and they are seeking a materialistic and a capitalistic life. And what the theme of this explanation here that Ibn Rajab then goes on to is to say that the more you become capitalistic and the more you become materialistic and the more you seek the life of the dunya and you attach yourself to it, the more it separates you from the Akhirah. To the extent that you could be the richest man in the dunya but not even actually benefit from not even a penny from that risk that you have. He quotes a statement from one of the companions, Ammar radiallahu anh. He said that it is sufficient that it is sufficient that death is an admonition to you. It's sufficient that you know that you're going to die, and this is enough as an admonition to you, because now all of what you are going to have in the dunya from the rizq will not benefit you in the slightest unless you have a level of zuhd with it, which is that you use that rizq for the sake of Allah. And here's another lengthy statement from Ibn Mas'ud and many other companions also, and the Salaf, in talking about seeking the Akhirah. This is the first aspect now. So you leave the dunya in seeking the Akhirah with Allah. The second aspect that we learn from this hadith also is to leave what is with the people. So you leave competing with one another and, using other people as a benchmark. So he's got a nice car, I want to have a nice car, I want to have a nice house. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said that when you start doing this, a level of doubt in the Akhirah and a level of despair will enter a person. So when he doesn't get that nice house, when he doesn't get that nice car, he will affect his iman. And it will also make him sad for the sake of the dunya, not for the sake of the Akhirah. It can also, like Ibn Rajab then goes on to explain, that it can also lead for oppression. Whether it's physical oppression or metaphorical oppression, where you are dishonoring the reputation of your brother or your sister, is that when you make the possessions of the people and you connect yourself to them, then you can end up oppressing one another and not treating one another fairly, because you want to have what he has, or be like him, or be better than him even, maybe. How do we get zuhd? Ibn Rajab then moves on. How do you get zuhd? How can you attain that level of seeking the Akhirah, what is with Allah, and forsaking the dunya, and not in competing with what is with the people? Ibn Rajab gives a series of steps. He said, number one, the greatest form of zuhd, forsakement, we're talking about here, is shirk. The greatest form of zuhd is to have zuhd in shirk. And the opposite of this is that you instill yourself with ikhlas. That's one of the biggest practical aspects you can do to be successful in the dunya and the akhirah. Another thing is that we've talked about before also, and we've mentioned here in this explanation also, it's a sign from your ikhlas that whether people talk about you in a good way or a bad way, whether it's your family member or whether it's in public, it doesn't affect you in the slightest. You are not concerned by the reputation that you have with the people. Obviously, this is an indication that you're doing something good or bad. If people treat you nicely and you are able to treat other people nicely also, don't get me wrong, it doesn't mean that you treat people in a bad manner. But what we're talking about here, as long as you're trying to do the right thing, it becomes irrespective as to what people say about you. Another thing is that Ibn Rajab goes on to say that you can have zuhd is when your inside is clean. It's clean in thoughts of Allah and His Messenger and His religion and His book and your fellow brother and sister. You make excuses for them, you speak of them well, you don't speak of them in a manner, and you have genuine concern and sincerity towards them. Another way that you know that you have zuhd, again, true meaning of zuhd, is when your private matters match your public matters. And this is extremely difficult. Unfortunately, we find even some of the pious people, when they close their doors, they become different. And this is something that we all have to tackle, even the best of us, let alone those people who may have some weakness in their iman. Again, there's many statements here from the Salaf which give plenty of insight, and they are quite lengthy in their statements. Another idea that we can get from having zuhd in the dunya is to leave what is less beneficial. So if you have an option between something wajib and something what is not wajib, or something which is mustahab, or something which is just mubah, you will do what is beneficial for your akhirah. And that we learn from this now also is that indulgences, even if the thing is mubah, engaging too much in something can never be a sake of forsakement in the dunya, seeking what is with Allah and leaving what is with the people. Because when people indulge in these indulgences, even if they're mubah, if they spend too much time eating and drinking and sleeping and playing games and looking nice and grooming themselves and cars and houses and all of these things, even if it is permissible in essence, if you engage heavily too much in this and it is not benefiting your akhirah, then you are not forsaking in the dunya. There's a statement here of the Prophet ﷺ which has some weakness in it, but if we look at the statement, we will see that it has a precedence in the Sharia. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا دَخَلَ أَهْلُ الْجَنَّةِ جَنَّةً, when the people of Jannah enter the Jannah, وَأَهْلُ النَّارِ النَّارِ, the people of the hellfire will enter the hellfire. Allah Jalla wa Ala will say, Ya Ahl Jannah, O people of Jannah, how long did you stay in the Adad al-Sinin? How many years did you stay in the dunya? They will say, قَالْ لَبِثْنَا يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْدَ يَوْمٍ, we stayed for maybe a day or part of a day. 24 hours or less than 24 hours. You could live for 80 years, 90 years, 100 years. They perceived life, 80 years, 90 years worth of life. Some people live for thousands of years. The conclusion was 24 hours maximum. That was the conclusion of their life. And this is what they will say to Allah Jalla wa Ala. Then Allah Jalla wa Ala will say, Naam, yes. Then you will be rewarded for a day or part of a day. If that's the case, that is the level of your reward. However, Rahmati wa Ridwani wa Jannati, my mercy, my pleasure, and my Jannah is far greater. And this is what I want to recompense with you with it. Unkuthu fiha khalidin, stay in there forever, eternally. This is because they lived in the dunya and they only saw it for 24 hours, and that 24 hours they thought, 24 hours time I'm going. And that's my time here. Yes, I want to do certain things, but I'm not going to do it. I mean, if you think about this rationally, if we go on a transit flight, you're here, and you stop over, I don't know, in Frankfurt, and you're making your way to Jeddah for Umrah or something like this. How long would you stay in Frankfurt? For an hour or 2 hours? Would it make sense that you go and you buy clothes, and you look for a mortgage, and you look to get married, you want to buy a house, you want to buy a car? Would you do those things? You're only there for 2 hours. Makes no sense at all. Whilst you were there for 2 hours, maybe you will go get a drink, maybe you will go to the bathroom, maybe you will change your clothes, and you will look at things which are temporary, number one, and you will look at things which are halal, number two. Not in any particular order. So the point here is, those people who are there in transit for those 2 hours, when they reach Jeddah, Allah will say to them, Khalas, you can stay here forever. You don't have to go back to your country, you have permanent visa. This is the end result. But when the people of hellfire enter the hellfire, Allah will ask them the same question, and will say, oh Allah, we only stayed there for a day or part of a day. And this has been mentioned in the Quran, and some of the ulama have mentioned that the reason why they will say this in the Quran, the reason why they will say this in Yawm al-Qiyamah, because they will know that Allah is most merciful. So if we say to Allah, Allah Jalla wa Ala, we only stay there for 24 hours, what does that mean? Only punish us for 24 hours, don't punish us for eternity. You are the most merciful. We have seen your mercy on this day. We have seen you and we believe in you on this day. Just punish us according to Allah Jalla wa Ala again will say, Naam, فَيَكُونُ بِئْسَ مَا أَجْرَتُمْ. The worst kind of recompense you will have on this day, the worst recompense you will have in exchange for the day or the part of the day that you were there in the dunya. My anger and my fire is for you, and stay in there forever, eternal. Again, this hadith has a level of weakness, but the idea here is very true, is that those people who have zuhd will be successful in the akhirah. And those people who don't have a level of zuhd will have regret. If you think about this hadith, also what we learn is that they are asked the same question from Allah Jalla wa Ala. If you are asked on Yawm al-Qiyamah the same question as somebody who is going to the hellfire, what does that mean? That means you have the same opportunities. Allah has given you and another person the exact same opportunity, and their answer was exactly the same. We stayed there for 24 hours or part of 24 hours. But the difference now is between that people and those people is that the first group of people, they knew when the time of relaxing and enjoyment will happen. The second group didn't. This is the concept of Zuhd, if you think about it. When you realize that this life is not a time to relax and it's not a time for enjoyment, then you will have eternal enjoyment and eternal relaxation. But if it's the opposite, then you will be held back. And you will be held back by the dunya, and this will affect your position in the Akhirah. May Allah protect us and our families. Zuhud also means, like Ibn Rajab goes on to continue, is that you are never satisfied that you have done enough. Following on from that hadith is the narration of Malik ibn Dinar. يَقُولُ النَّاسِ يَقُولُونَ Malik Zahid. The people say about Malik ibn Dinar. Malik ibn Dinar was one of the Imams of the Salaf also. And they said that Malik ibn Dinar is a Zahid. He is somebody who is extremely pious. Every single moment of his life is for the Akhirah. So Malik ibn Dinar, rahimahullah, said, إِنَّمَا Zahid Umar bin Abdul Aziz. He said, not me. You want to see somebody who is living for the Akhirah, go look at Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Again, he's another one of the pious leaders of the Salaf from the progeny of Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. But the point here is that Malik ibn Dinar didn't see himself as being somebody who has accomplished anything. And if you feel that you have accomplished, then you will fall into that mode of relaxation, that mode of enjoyment. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah also said that it's been narrated from many of the Salaf that when you used to see them constantly tired. This was how their default position was: lack of sleep, lack of food, and they were constantly concerned for the Akhirah. Well, again, here we are not saying that you live a life of tormenting yourself and punishing yourself. No, you don't eat and you don't relax. But obviously the Salaf had a different idea and a different level of tolerance for seeking the Akhirah, which we definitely cannot match, because the dunya is much more engulfing over us. But the point here is that even you go into work, even your basic interactions can be a level of zuhd, if you are intending by this for the Akhirah. Ibn Rajab then goes on to mention, rahimahullah, that these generations that came before us are the most pious generation, and they will go to Jannah. The reason being is that they were the best of manners, and from this they will have the best of rewards. And Allah will give them tawfiq to enjoy the zuhud that they have been given in. So as a result of their zuhud, they've been given the best of manners and the best of rewards in the dunya and the akhirah, and they've been given a level of enjoyment and seeking the akhirah. It's not a form of punishment from them. So this is what he's following on from saying, that yes, you found the Salaf sleeping 3-4 hours, fasting excessively, but they loved it. It wasn't punishment for them. And this is from the greatest of the favours that Allah can give upon His slave in the dunya and the akhirah, when you have a level of love in seeking Allah and His akhirah. And he continued to say, rahimahullah, is that they realized that each deed, and this is what drove them, that each deed is multiplied by 10. And we will see in the following hadith, each deed is multiplied by 10. So that true prevention, true hirman, true level of loss is when you are faced and you come on Yawm al-Qiyamah and a person said Subhanallah once and he has had 10 more than you could have had, then you will realize that I have lost out. Imagine those people who have absolutely nothing or very minimal, they have lost out on that multiplication. And this is what drove the Salaf. In summary, what we can say from this hadith is that we learn that the Salaf, and from the head of them is the one who has given the advice, alayhi salam, to this man, Sahal ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi, is that Allah Jalla wa Ala in the Quran has to remind this generation that you have to have some part of the dunya. Allah says in the Quran, وَلَا تَنْسَ نَصِيبَكَ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Allah said to this generation, what did He say to this generation? Don't forget the dunya. What does that mean? That means their default position in the dunya is just to seek the akhirah. So when they wake up in the morning, they're not thinking about work, they're not thinking about kids, they're not thinking about education, not thinking about the car or the house. But Allah has to remind them, don't forget those aspects. You see the point here? But unfortunately, as time gets worse, and our hearts get harder, and our desires get even more shallow, it is as if people have to be reminded, لا تنسى نصيبك من الدين. It's become the opposite. Don't forget that when you wake up in the morning, you have a small aspect of the day which is about your deen. Don't forget that. You see how the zuhud has become completely opposite. Ask Allah to give us the tawfiq to seek the akhirah and what is with Him, and not have a connection to this dunya. The hadith number 32, الثاني والثلاثون, is on the authority of Abu Sa'id Sa'ad ibn Malik ibn Sinan al-Khudri radiallahu anhu. He said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا ضرر ولا ضرار, that there should be no harm or there should be no reciprocation of harm. And there's a footnote here which is talking about the authenticity of this hadith, and some of the ulama have classified it as weak. But many of the ulama have said that the very minimum is hadith Hasan, which has been narrated by Imam Malik and Daraqutni and other people, ulama from the people of hadith. Either way, even if it is weak, then it has been accepted wholeheartedly from the ulama as a principle in the Sharia, and is also included into the penal code of the way the Sharia legislation works. And these following hadith are going to talk a bit more about principles and a bit more about legislation in the penal code also. But what this hadith means, that there should be no harm or causing of harm, is that it could have two meanings. Number one, it could be that the person cannot be a harmful individual, and he cannot be harmful in his actions. He cannot be twisted in his head, and he cannot be twisted in his actions. He cannot be somebody. So now here we learn that there should be no harm. This is descriptive of a person. And there should be no reciprocation of harm. There should be no foregoing with harm. That is his actions. So this hadith can refer to what a believer should be like or not be like. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that there cannot be an allowing of harm to occur, and there cannot be an allowing or assisting in harm. So now if we look at the second meaning here, is that you have to be mindful of the society and the environment that you're in, and remove harm and remove the helping of harm. So this hadith is, even though it's 5 words, it is very, very profound, and there are many principles that have been taken from this. In fact, I believe even some books have been written on these 5 words from the Prophet ﷺ, showing you that he has been given the Jawam al-Kalim that we talked about in the very beginning, that he has been given concise speech with comprehensive meaning. What we learn from this is, from these principles, is that when you want to remove harm, we have to weigh up the pros and the cons. So if you're going to remove a presumed harm and it's going to create more harm, then that's not allowed. The Prophet said, don't create harm. So if it means to allow harm to happen by not creating more harm and you're not going to remove it, then you leave it. That's one principle in the Sharia. Also, another principle in the Sharia is that to remove the harm, then you must remove what you are able to remove. And this is something which unfortunately has led to a lot of problems in the Muslim Ummah, where people have been radicalized and have extremism in them, and they want to remove whatever they feel as being incorrect in the dunya, whether it's infidels or whatever in language they use. They want to remove it completely. But this qaida, this principle here, is teaching us that you will not be able to remove something unless you have the ability to do something. So even if we were to agree with you for argument's sake, what army do you have behind you? What government do you have behind you? What policies do you have behind you? If you don't have any of these things in place, then what you're going to do is you're just going to create more mayhem and bloodshed, and the life and the wealth of innocent people to be lost, and people being displaced, unfortunately. So what you are able to do, you do it according to your ability, whether it's zero or whether it's total or whether it's somewhere in between. Also, this hadith teaches us another important principle in the Sharia, is that the greater harm and the lesser of all evils must be reviewed. Must be reviewed. So you as a parent, you as a child even, with your parent, you as a neighbor, you in your environment, you in the workplace, you have to review the greater harm and the lesser of two evils in all situations. So if you look at the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, it's instilling wisdom, instilling concept, instilling perspective, instilling people, and is creating individuals who will be intellectual in the way they think, and not harsh, and not rash, and not very quick, and not emotional. Also, we learn from this hadith, a very important principle, is that dar' al-mafasid, that preventing harm, muqaddim ala jalb al-masalih. And this is a very important qaida in the Sharia also, that removing or not allowing harm to happen takes precedence in trying to do good. So if I want to do good to this brother, but in the process I will be harmed, or there will be other harm, then I give default to not creating harm, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "La dar," don't harm, even if I want to do something good. So this is hadith number 32 in a nutshell. I mean, the Shaykh goes on to give plenty of examples in the fiqh of this hadith and these principles, which bi'idhnillah we can, revisit on another occasion. Hadith number 33, the 33rd is on the authority of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, if people, لو يؤتى الناس بدعواهم, if people were given whatever they claimed, then a man can claim the wealth and the lives of other people. لكن البينة على مدعي. However, the burden of the proof is upon the claimant. وَالْيَمِينَ عَلَى مَنْ أَنْكَرَ. An oath must be given by the one who denies. So again, here we have another hadith which is looking at the Sharia system, the judicial system, the Qadi system in Islam. And this is also very important because not only does this hadith teach us that we have to verify before we accept, we have to have trustworthy narrations that come to us about incidents, but also, and this is a very important principle that a lot of people don't understand, unfortunately we get a phone call nearly every week, maybe more than once a week, where people are ringing in and they're saying, what do you say about somebody who's doing such and such and such and such, and he's doing it to me, and he's doing it to my kids, and he's doing it. There's a huge difference between fatwa and giving a religious ruling. And they've said, yeah, I read it on the internet, and this sheikh said this, and I can do this to him now. And a religious ruling, a judicial ruling. There's a difference between a religious ruling and a judicial ruling. So now here the Prophet ﷺ, is he speaking as a mufti or qadi? He's speaking as a qadi. Because if two people come to me now I have to assess the situation. Now we have to assess the situation. And the answer that I give is not fatwa. The answer that I give is not the ruling, is it halal or is it haram? No. The answer that we're going to give is about who has the most right. That's very important. So a husband might say, well, she's doing this, and the wife might say that he's doing this. It's not an issue of fatwa now. It's not an issue like, well, the man shouldn't do this, this is haram, and the woman should do it, and this is wajib. It's not about that. It's about looking at the rights. So what the qadi does now, let's look at what a qadi would do. Now looking at this now here, there's a very important point here in this hadith also, where the Prophet ﷺ is talking about da'wat. And here we're talking about claims, allegations. And these allegations now are talking about wealth, as the Prophet ﷺ said, amwal wa dima. We're talking about wealth, and we're talking about honor, and we're talking about crimes that are being committed against one another. We're not talking about anything else here. I can't think of an example, but we're talking about an allegation that has been made between one or two parties, or maybe even more. So in this scenario, they will go to the court, and the qadi will have to look at both sides of the scenario. He can't say, well, yes, okay, I'll issue the khula for the sister because she's being oppressed, she has no money, she has no nothing, without looking at the husband. The husband might say, well, I'm not giving her money because she keeps buying bags and shoes and all these things. It's possible. She's wasting the money, so I'm not giving the money. I froze an account. I'm not doing anything wrong. Then you would have oppressed. So the qadi must look at both sides of the scenario. The first thing that he does is he looks at ways how to reconcile and how to create pardon between them. It could be two brothers. He sold me a car and he did this to me and he done that to me. The engine wasn't working. There was no oil. He told me it was brand new. And then you go away, there's absolutely no oil, there's no nothing, the gearbox is finished. The Think of reconciliation. How can we get this sorted? Does he admit, does he think, okay, I can give him some money and he can buy it? Look at reconciliation, look at ways to pardon. If the Qadi needs to process the matter further, then there are at least three steps. Number one, look at confession. He sold him a car, and he said it was 2010, but it was actually 2008. When he got the logbook, it said 2008. 2010 is a private number plate. So he's been ripped off. 2 years, it's probably £1,000, £2,000 difference. Yes, my brother, it was my mistake, I'm very sorry. It's confession, here's your money back. Or here's the difference. Class, confession, that's fine. Then the issue is closed. If that fails, then the Qadi looks at proof. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about here. Lakin al-bayyina al-mut. So now he says to him, he sold me the car 2008, and it was supposed to be 2010. Where is your proof that you sold the car to him and it was based on 2010? Here's the advert in the newspaper. Here's the text message that he sent me. If that's the case, khalas, he's got his proof, and he has got nothing to rely on now. The situation is closed. If he says 2010 and he says 2000, he has no real proof, then the Prophet ﷺ said he must bring the proof. If he has no proof, then we look at what this brother is saying. Has he got proof? If he's got proof, then he is rejected. His claim is his allegation is rejected. If not, he has proof and he is rejecting it, then this person has every right to reject it, but he takes an oath. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ said, that a person takes the oath. And there are many narrations that talk about taking an oath whilst lying. And there's a narration where the Prophet ﷺ said that anybody who lies whilst taking an oath, he will meet Allah wa alayhi qadban. I believe that the narration goes, that Allah will meet him on Yawm al-Qiyamah and Allah will be severely angry with him. And there are many different narrations that are talking about taking an oath in an unjust manner. If one of the sides or both of the sides have a witness, then a witness can also be brought in. He sold me this car 2010. I don't have any proof, but here's my witness. My brother was with me when I bought the car. Was it 2010? Yes, it was. Was he trustworthy? Yes, he is trustworthy. Some of the ulama say that he needs to take an oath also. He doesn't need to, according to the majority, and this is what is the correct opinion. So now when he's presenting his proof, he can say, here's my proof, and I swear by Allah, this is what he did to me. Or he can get a witness and say, here's my witness, and I swear by Allah, we were here, and this is what he did to me. And the person who has been alleged against now has his opportunity. If he is able to now bring the proof, then he can refute him. If he's got a witness, then he can refute him. If not, then he takes an oath. Now in a situation where the Qadi is unsure, what he then does is he reviews the situation. He reviews the situation. If he thinks that the claim is stronger, then he can side with either way. If he thinks that, okay, what we need to do is seek a middle ground, then he can seek a middle ground. If he wants to throw it out, he can throw it out. So this is what the Prophet ﷺ is basically in a nutshell saying here, that anybody who makes an allegation must be somebody who is trustworthy, and he must bring his proof. And if he has no proof, then he will be sinful. So then how about those people who talk and unfortunately make ghibah and make namima and speak about people, and they get into conspiracy theories and they talk about all these things? Yes, it's not an allegation that you are placing against someone, but the tongue is something which is very important, that we must be careful in what we are saying. Hadith number 34 is on the hadith on the authority of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. So that I heard the Prophet ﷺ say, whoever amongst you sees something evil, man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyiru biyadihi, then he should change it with his hand. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. If he's not able to, then with his tongue. فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ. And if he's not able to, then with his heart. وَذَلِكَ أَدْأَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. And that is the lowest and the weakest form of iman. Now this last part, many people don't understand it correctly, and even unfortunately some of the extremists don't understand this correctly, and this is what we're going to explain here. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said, well, this hadith is talking again about the judicial system also, but it's also talking about the social and the policing system here now also. how do you police one another? Now, can I go and police this brother in his house or in the street? Can I do that? That's not allowed. I've also heard of incidents while I was in Saudi Arabia that people were actually doing this on the streets of Luton and these kind of places, where they were walking around and they felt that they had authority based on this hadith, and they were trying to forbid munkar and enjoy the good. But before going into this, Ibn Rajab rahimahullah talks about a fitna that is going to come, and he said what this hadith teaches us, that is that fitna will become widespread, and unfortunately ignorance will become widespread. And one of the biggest things that happen is that when fitna and ignorance becomes widespread, then those people who do not enjoy good, forbid evil, will also be included in that fitna. And there are many hadith which talk about the punishment and not having a level of concern in enjoying good and giving advice and any kind of jealousy towards your brother in a positive sense and wanting good for them. There are many narrations here that he mentions which talk about the weakness of Iman and how such people could even possibly be punished. So what this teaches is that we have to show a high level of importance in doing good and removing harm in society, even if it's with the non-Muslims. We should advise and we should help one another in spreading what is good. And many of the values, this is another thing that many people don't understand correctly, many of these British values that they are trying to enforce on a governmental level in schools, etc., many of them are quite good. If you're talking about, it says that we should be tolerant towards one another, we shouldn't be unjust towards one another, you shouldn't lie and you shouldn't cheat, and many of these are principles within the Sharia of Islam, and this is something that we should definitely cooperate in. He then goes on, rahimahullah, to talk about the way of changing the munkar and enjoying good. And again, he says, before even talking about this is according to ability. This is according to ability. If you're not able, then you do what you are able to do. If you're not able to do any of these things, then the Prophet ﷺ said, وَذَلِكَ أَضَفْ لِمَنْ, that is the weakest form. What is the weakest form of Iman? Maybe adaf here shouldn't really be translated as being weak, as we will see. The first stage is that a person who has a level of authority, power and ability, then he should change it with his hand. So if you are in charge of a country, if you're in charge of a company, if you're in charge of your household, and you have the ability and the power and the authority given by Allah, then you are in a position to change it with your hand. If you have no authority, I don't have any authority over this child or this brother, then what you should do is use your speech, give good advice, use hikmah, use diplomacy, all of these things. But Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said that this comes with the prerequisite of having knowledge. You can't go and advise and change the munkar when you don't even know the situation of what you are trying to change. That's number one. You must be wise in the way that you're doing it because of the qawaid that we looked at previously before, that there shouldn't be greater harm. But another thing is that you should also know the situation of the people. So now, for example, if I see a brother and he's doing something wrong, maybe he's smoking a cigarette, and I go to him and I'm harsh with him and I speak to him in a bad manner, that's number one, that could be greater harm. That's not wise. Am I using knowledge? Not really, if you're speaking to him in a bad way. But it could also be that this person has been informed by his sheikh and his mufti that it is halal for him to do so. Maybe his situation is better. Maybe he was smoking drugs and now he's smoking cigarettes. And the mufti that he has spoken to, the sheikh that he's spoken to, is using this as a way for him to stop and rehabilitate. Maybe. And I'm not trying to say that this is something which is halal or plausible. But what I'm trying to say is that you need to know the hal of the people before you want to engage with them. And if you do engage with them, then you do it with wisdom. If you are not able to change it with your hand, you have no authority. And if you're not able to speak to him because you don't know his state or you don't have any authority even to speak, then you have to hate it or have some kind of jealousy towards it, towards what is right, and hate what is wrong in your heart. And this is the weakest, as it's been translated here. But it's not weakest, it means the least. The least form. This is the minimum obligation that you must have. So if you're walking down the street, there's a person there smoking a cigarette, another person there drinking alcohol, another person there not praying salah, not coming to the masjid, you're going. What you must do, if you are able to, Change it with your hand. Are we able to change it with your hand? No, we are not. We're not police officers. We're not appointed by a government that does these things, and it's not legislation. So you can't do it. Can you speak? Maybe you can speak to one of them. Maybe you can speak to all of them and speak to them in a nice way. Remind them, tell them to make tawbah, come to the masjid. That's fine. If you're unable to do any of these things, maybe none of them are Muslim, then you wish for them khair in your heart, and you wish that Allah protects you from the evil that they are doing, and you carry on. That is the minimum obligation that you must have. Then Ibn Rajab rahimahullah goes on to talking about how we should give advice to those people who are in charge, because obviously here we have a level of policing that this hadith is talking about. He's talking about how revolting with force creates more fitna and more bloodshed. Fudayl ibn Iyad and Imam Ahmad, Imam Malik and Ishaq ibn Rahoya and all of these ulama from the Salaf have talked about when you revolt, it will just create more harm, etc. And Ibn Rajab rahimahullah then goes on to say that even at sometimes when you think that you're doing good, you are enjoining good or you're forbidding evil, sometimes you might even be haram for you. It might actually even be something which you are sinful in doing. Ibn Rajab is explaining. Sometimes it might be wajib, and sometimes you might be better off in not doing it. Not that you're falling into something haram, but it might be better off if you don't do it because possibly of the greater harm, etc. involved. Hadith number 35 is the hadith of Abu Hurairah, where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Do not envy one another." And this is a hadith which is talking about instilling goodness in society and brotherhood. Do not envy one another. And hasad, which is envy, refers to a good that another person has been given. And remember, the first hadith is talking about zuhd, and not to be attached to what people have. This is the opposite here. Hasad is when you attach yourself to what that person is being given, and you wish that it is removed from them and given to you. This is envy. And this is obviously a major sin. And the first one to do this was Iblis himself. And we find also that there are people who have hasad against us in our ummah also. وَدَّ كَثِيرٌ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ لَوْ يُرِيدُونَكُمْ مِنْ إِيمَانِكُمْ كُفَّارًا حَسَدًا مِنْ عِنْدِ أَنفُسِهِمْ. That they wish that the good that you have had, the iman, the good deeds and the salawat, etc., be taken away and thrown away so that you can become worthless. Hasad is absolutely evil. Rather, what we have been commanded in our religion is to have goodness for one another, goodness for mankind. إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْحَسَدِ, the Prophet said, be wary of hasad, because hasad eats your good deeds, كَمَا تَأْكُلُ النَّارُ حَطَبًا, just like fire endeavours firewood. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, do not inflate prices against one another. If I want to buy a commodity from this brother comes along, and them two are friends, and he pretends to buy it as well. So I'll say, okay, I'll give you £20 for your phone. He'll say, no, I'll give you £25 for you. Okay, I'll give you 30 then. Cost 30. Instead of 20, what it's actually worth, inflated the prices. To one another, that is haram. Do not inflate prices against one another. وَلَا تَنَاجَسُوا وَلَا تَبَاغَضُوا, and don't hate one another. وَلَا تَدَابَرُوا, and do not turn away from one another. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah says turning away can refer to turning away, literally ignoring and rejecting one another, but it can also refer to cutting off and boycotting one another. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said that even if you do not want to speak to your brother for a worldly reason, you are not allowed to cut him off, even with the salam. La yahillu mu'min an yahjur akhahu fawqa thalath. It's not permissible for a mu'min, a person who truly believes, to avoid his brother and not even give him salam, etc. وَلَا تَدَابَرُوا وَلَا يَبِيعْ بَعْدُكُمْ عَلَى بَيْءِ بَعْدٍ. Do not undercut one another when you are dealing in transactions. Now the ulama have said, like Ibn Rajab here, he's talking about business, but he's also talking about proposals. It's also talking about, so for example, I want to marry a sister, and this brother comes along and says, look, marry me instead. That's undercutting. Could it also be a job? I've applied for a job and he undercuts me. That's also a form of undercutting. Undercutting means that if a brother is interested in something, and that interest is shown, and that interest is registered, and that other party are now contemplating, now they've accepted it and they're contemplating, it's not permissible for another person to come. However, if I was to say to this brother, can I marry your daughter? Then you think, okay, let me think about it, let me speak to my family. Is it permissible for him to come and ask as well? What do you think?
The second person?
Yeah, second person. No. This scenario, huh? Another person. Yeah. Is it permissible? It is permissible. And the proof of this is the Prophet ﷺ, the woman came to him, Fatima bint, I believe it's Fatima bint Hubaysh. She said that Abu Sufyan wants to marry me, Muawiyah wants to marry me, and Zayd wants to marry me. All these people don't want to marry me. Which one shall I marry? So the Prophet ﷺ said, marry this one. The point here is that more than one person has shown an interest, and that is permissible, as long as the woman or the person has not made a decision. So he's saying, look, marry me, and then he'll say, look, marry me, and then he'll say, marry me. Okay, I'm saying it, thinking about all of them. But now, if I say, marry your daughter to me, then he says yes, and everything is agreed, and she's agreed, and everybody's happy. Then he comes along and says, no, don't marry him, marry me, I'll give him more mahar, and I'll be better, and then this is haram. This is undercutting. And the same applies to jobs. He's got a company, he's got a job. He's put a job for an engineer. I'm an engineer, he's an engineer. I'll say to him, okay, look, here's my CV. I think I'm the best person for the job. He's the best person. And he's reviewing every single one of them. That is not undercutting, because he's not made a decision. Undercutting is where you come and you take away the haqq that has already been given to you. وَقُونُوا عِبَادُ اللَّهِ إِخْوَانًا. And be brothers. Be brothers. Give rights to one another. Look after one another when they're sick, when they're healthy. Create harmony. And the Prophet ﷺ then has told us how we should be a Muslim. Al-Muslim أخو Muslim. How you can لا يظلمه ولا يخذله ولا يكذبه ولا يحقره. التقوى ها هنا. Taqwa is, he pointed to his heart 3 times, to his chest 3 times. He said a Muslim doesn't oppress another Muslim. He doesn't deceive him. He doesn't lie to him. He doesn't hold him to contempt. And this all come from the virtue of having taqwa. If you have taqwa, and all of this will be easy for you. You genuinely want khair for your brother and your sister and your fellow Muslim. It is bad enough for a Muslim that he holds his brother Muslim in contempt. All of a Muslim, kull Muslim al-Muslim haram, everything for another Muslim is haram, his blood, his property and his honor. And it can only be given to those people who have taqwa. Hadith number 36, the Hadith of Abu Hurairah, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever relieves a believer from a distress of this world, Allah will relieve him of a distress from the distresses of Yawm al-Qiyamah. So if you look at the end of Hadith number 35 and the beginning of Hadith number 36, or even all of 35, you're looking at how to create stability in the Dunya and the Akhirah through the virtue of brotherhood. So here the Prophet ﷺ is telling us to remove harm. And you can only do this if you stay concerned. You can only do this if you stay concerned. If you don't really care for your brother, then you're just asking, how are you? And you don't really care. Prophet ﷺ said, Kurba min kurba dunya. Kurba refers to a distress, which is a desperate need. And this is different, like Ibn Rajab rahimahullah is talking to Haja. Haja is a need. So he needs a lift to the petrol station. That's fine. If you don't do it, then that's... Obviously, it's not better, but it's not the... But here, the Prophet ﷺ is talking about a dire distress. So he's poor and he needs, genuine help. If you do this, then Allah will remove a genuine reason of distress for you on the Day of Judgment. Whoever facilitates for one in debt, Allah will facilitate for him in the world and in the hereafter. Look how Allah gives. You help one person, Allah will give you more. And also we learn from another hadith, this hadith Qudsi, the Prophet ﷺ told us that Allah said that, why didn't you visit me when I was sick? On the Day of Judgment He will tell somebody, why didn't you visit me when I was sick? So they will say, how can you be sick, Ya Rabbul Alameen? The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah Jalla wa Ala will say on that day, that the sick person, if you would have visited him and helped him, you would have found me with him. But you didn't do that. So here's the same sort of message, helping one another in debts. Whoever covers a Muslim, Allah will cover him in the world and in the Akhirah, in this world and the Akhirah. Allah will aid his slave as long as he aids his brother. Whoever pursues a path of seeking knowledge, Allah will make easy for him a path of paradise. No people gather together in the house of Allah, reciting the book of Allah and studying it amongst themselves except tranquility. This and now here the Prophet ﷺ goes on to talk about the virtues of seeking ilm and how you can engage in the virtues of seeking the dunya and the akhirah with ilm, because you need ilm. Ilm is a prerequisite for you to gain all of the things that we mentioned above. So what happens when you come to the masjid and you seek knowledge? The Prophet ﷺ is telling us a series of things. Number one, tranquility descends upon you. نزلت عليهم السكينة وغشيتهم الرحمة. Mercy surrounds them. Verse number 2. Number 3, وحفتهم الملائكة. Right now the angels are around us بإذن الله. Verse number 3. وذكرهم الله في من عنده. Allah is talking about every single one of us above His arsh to the angels that are there below Him. Virtue number 4. Then Prophet ﷺ said that whoever is slowed down by his actions will not be hastened forward by his lineage. You want the khair in the dunya and the akhirah, you can only get it through knowledge and having ikhlas and taqwa and seeking to do the right thing. Your wealth, your family, your progeny, nothing else is going to help you on that day. Nothing is going to make you get stronger in the dunya and have success in the akhirah, except for having ikhlas and ilm and acting upon it. Hadith number 37, the hadith of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ said, and we've talked about this hadith before, so we'll quickly go over it. Indeed, Allah has written the good deeds and the bad deeds. Allah has written all good deeds and all bad deeds. And then He explained it, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Whoever intends to do a good deed but didn't do it, what happens? If you want to do a good deed but you don't do it, what happens? It's recorded, but what happens? You get 1 reward or 10 rewards? 1 reward. You want to do a good deed but you didn't do it, you get 1 reward. I want to give him sadaqah, it's in my pocket, I didn't do it. I get 1 reward. I didn't get a chance to do it, or something happened, I didn't. Not that I changed my mind, that's different. Okay. Whoever intended to do a good deed but didn't do it, Allah writes for him 1 complete reward. Not half, not 3/4, complete. Hasana kamila. If he intended to do the reward, when hamma biha fa'amilaha kataba Allah indahu 10 hasanat. Allah will write for him 10 good deeds. I want to give him sadaqah. I give him the £10 that I wanted to give him. How many did I give him? £10. How much have I given him now? £100. I gave him 10, it's 100. Yeah? But does it stop there? The bare minimum is 10. So you say subhanallah, you don't know what it means, you're not even thinking about it, khalas, Allah has written for you 10. إِلَى 700 ضِعْف. Up to 700 times. I've given him 10. I genuinely want for him khair. I want for him to enter Jannah. I want him to use this £10 to be dutiful to his mother and to his father. Anything. The more level of quality, that £10 can easily become £7,000. Up to then the Prophet ﷺ, أَضْعَافٍ كَثِيرًا. Does it stop at 700? No, the Prophet ﷺ said that it could even be multiplied even more than 700. I've given him £10, it could even be 7 million with Allah. Sorry, I've given him £10, it could even be 10 million with Allah. There's no boundaries to the reward that Allah is prepared to give you. But look at the mercy of Allah. His mercy is that if you do a bad deed, how many do you get? 10? 700? Just 1. Do a bad deed, just 1. Do a good deed, could be millions. Minimum 10. Mercies. But if you want to do a bad deed and then you actually change your mind, what happens? Nothing happens. No sin is happening. But you actually get 1 complete good deed. وإن هم بالسيئة فلم يعملها كتبه الله عنده حسنة كاملة. I want to say something bad about him. He did something bad. I want to say something bad about him, but astaghfirullah, I won't do it. One good deed, just for leaving it. وإن هم بها فعملها كتبه الله سيئة واحدة. Look at the mercy. How can you gain this though? This is the question. How can you gain times 10? Times 10 is there written. The multiplication is there. So a child does it, he doesn't know what he is doing, but his parents are telling him, he'll get it bi'idhnillah. But how can you get 700? How can you get 1 million? Ibn Rajab, Barakallah Fizakallah, Ibn Rajab Rahimahullah said that he's now seen the very importance of having Ikhlas and the importance of having good thoughts. One another, with Allah, with His religion, with being optimistic. And you will not get this virtue unless if you want to seek that opportunity. You have to seek the opportunity. You can't just sit in your bed and think, Khalas, I'll do it tomorrow. I should be reciting Quran today, but let me just carry on flicking the channels and then just go to sleep without even praying the witr. You can't seek that. How are you going to get the hundreds? How are you going to get the thousands? Hadith number 38. Do the fish at 40 bi'idhnillah. Hadith number 38 is the Hadith of Abu Hurairah, who said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, indeed Allah the Exalted said, Hadith Qudsi, whoever shows enmity to a wali, a devotee, a close, pious member of this ummah to Allah, of mine, so whoever is a strong devotee to Allah, anybody shows enmity to this person, then I have declared war against them. فَقَدْ آذَنْتُهُ بِالْحَرْبِ وَمَنْ تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيْهَ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ وَمَا تَقَرَّبَ إِلَيْهَ عَبْدِي بِشَيْءٍ. A slave doesn't seek to get closer to me except what I have made fard, or made an obligation upon him. So how do you get closer to Allah? Is by piety and by fulfilling what Allah has told you to do. This is how Allah will love you. This is how Allah will allow you to get closer to Him. But then you will be given tawfiq to do something more. وَلَا يَزَالْ أَبْدِي. So now this slave has attained that level of closeness, a connection with Allah. But how does he continue? He gets that enjoyment that we were talking about before. He gets that zuhd, he gets that taqwa, he gets that ikhlas, he seeks that opportunity. He wants to become better. يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيْهِ بِالنَّوَافِلِ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. He continues to do these good deeds until, number one, Allah has given tawfiq to do the obligatory ones. It might be Allah loves this person or not. This person continues to show sincerity and shows rectification and shows seeking the opportunity and seeking Allah's Akhirah until Allah will love that person. What happens if Allah loves you? Nothing can fail you. Nothing can harm you. Allah is saying here, you show enmity to that person, then Allah declares war. من أدى لي ولي فقد آذنت بالحرب. Until I love him, فإذا أحببت, when I love him, when my slave becomes beloved to me, كنت سمعه الذي يسمع به. I become his hearing with what he hears by. What does that mean? That you use your hearing for the sake of Allah. You hear something which is haram, you hear something which is makruh, you hear ghiba, you hear namima, you hear something which is corrupt, it affects you. You can't listen to it. You want to change it, you might want to give advice, but the bare minimum, you don't want to hear it. وَبَصَرُهُ الَّذِي يُبْصِرُ بِهِ. His eyesight that he starts to see with. When you look, you don't want to see bad things that are happening. You don't want to be in a bad area where bad things are happening. You don't want to look at bad things that are happening. وَيَدَهُ الَّتِي يَبْتَشُ بِهَا. His hand, that which he strikes with or which he seeks with. He will shake hands with people. He will have a connection with people. He will seek rizq. He will eat from the provisions. All of these things in seeking Allah's Akhirah, making Him happy, to maintain that level of love that Allah Jalla wa Ala was talking about in the beginning of this Hadith Qudsi. And his feet that he walks with. وَلَئِن سَأَلْنِي وَإِن سَأَلَنِي لَأُعْطِيَنَّهُ. And if he was to ask me, I will give him. And this is the connection that the person will have with Allah. And it's the result of the love, it's the result of the actions, it's the result of you seeking that closeness. وَلَئِنْ اسْتَعَاذَنِي لَأُؤِيذَنَّهُ. If he seeks refuge in me, I will surely give him the refuge that he seeks. Hadith number 39 is Hadith of Ibn Abbas رضي الله عنهما أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن الله تجاوز لي عن أمتي الخطأ والنسيان وما استكره عليه. That Allah has pardoned for me and my nation mistakes, forgetfulness, and what we have been forced to do. And these last few ahadith are talking about the mercy of Allah and the opportunity that Allah is giving us to seek to get closer to Him, and the Akhirah that He has prepared for the believers. And Wallahu A'lam, it appears as if Imam Nawawi has placed these hadith strategically, especially with hadith number 40, as we will see. But hadith number 39, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us here that Allah doesn't want for us hardship. After talking about getting closer to Him and attaining His love, Allah doesn't want for us hardship. And in fact, His pardoning is ever surrounding us. So here, Allah doesn't take into account in matters that we are forced to do. And the ulama have said that you could be forced in a statement and you could be forced in an action. But can you be forced in belief? You can't be forced in belief. But you could be forced in a statement and you can be forced in an action. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah then goes on to talk about forced actions. These forced actions are actions which transgress against yourself. So for example, Muslims in China are not allowed to fast. In the day of Ramadan, during the day of Ramadan, they are forced to drink water. In certain places, they are forced to drink alcohol and forced to eat meat, eat pork. I've seen this in some newspaper reports. Wallahu alam if they are correct, but so this transgression is against the person, against themselves. Now, can duress be where a person is forcing me to do something against another person? Is that allowed? Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said that it doesn't include transgressing the rights of other people. So if this person wants to harm you, then let him harm you. But you can't harm someone else. That would not be duress. What would duress mean? What is included in duress? Here we're talking about somebody who is actually going to harm you. Somebody who is able to fulfill that level of harm, and that the harm is actually real. So if a person says to you, for example, drink this alcohol, otherwise I'm going to hit you, what are you going to do? Is that duress? It's not a high level of harm, so then it's not duress. If a person says to you, drink this alcohol, otherwise I will shoot, he has no bullet in there, or you know that he's not going to pull the trigger, is that duress? No, it's not duress. So now here we're talking about a person who has actual harm. He has got a bullet in there. Number two, he is actually going to do it. And number three, the harm is severe. The harm is severe. So this is duress. And this is what we have been forgiven. Hardships, well, Allah Jalla wa Ala is talking about removing of hardships in general here with all of these hadith. And mistakes are overlooked, mistakes that you genuinely make, whether it's a matter of ijtihad or whether it's a matter that you have genuinely done out of human error, and forgetfulness. Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said all of these are overlooked. However, there is an important point here, is that it doesn't absolve you from acts of worship. So a person, for example, may forget to make wudu, or he may make a mistake in his salat. These would not be overlooked. What this hadith means is that you are not sinful and not accountable for mistakes and forgetfulness, but the rights of Allah and other people must be upheld. And the last hadith for today is the hadith of Ibn Umar, which is hadith number 40, that the Prophet ﷺ took hold of my shoulders and he said, and again this is a hadith where we are saying that the collection of hadith here now are ending with Imam al-Nawawi inciting us to have taqwa and to seek the akhirah, and to have taqwa and leave in the sense of taqwa, or leave with a sense of detachment to the dunya, leave being fully prepared. So the Prophet ﷺ took Ibn Umar, أخذ رسول الله بمنكبي, he took me by my shoulders. فقال كن في الدنيا كأنك غريب أو عابر السبيل. Be in this world as though you are a stranger or somebody that is passing by the dunya. And the rest of this narration, which is not the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, is that Ibn Umar used to say, if you reach the evening, then do not wait until the morning. Yeah, seeking, the Akhirah. And if you reach the morning, then do not wait till the evening. Do not trust it. Do not trust that morning is going to come. Do not trust that evening is going to come. Take advantage of your health before sickness. Do not trust that you will have your health, and take advantage of your life before death. Do not trust your life. Do not trust any of these things, because that's what this hadith means. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is explaining this hadith to us. When the Prophet ﷺ said, "Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib," do not trust the dunya. Do not trust your provisions in it. Do not trust your health within it. Do not trust your span in it. Or abir sabil, like we were talking about, you're on transit for 2 hours. This dunya is a transit for you. And this hadith summarizes all of the 39 that came before it. And Ibn Rajab rahimahullah is saying that what we learn from this, and the salaf of this ummah and their attitude, as we see in the statement of Ibn Umar, is that these are the people who had a high level of trustworthiness and truthfulness with Allah. And when the treasures of this dunya were given to them and open to them, they were not attached to it. So just before Ibn Rajab rahimahullah said, if you look at what happened to certain groups of people in the ummahs that came before us, he said that these people, some of them were very, very pious. If you look at Bani Israel and others, they were very, very pious. But when the dunya became open to other people from other ummahs, when the dunya was open to them, just before they were telling people to fear Allah and seek the Akhirah, but when the dunya was given to them, they became distracted. And they forgot the same advice that they were giving. And they became attached to the dunya. But if you look at this ummah, and the salaf of this ummah, and this statement of the Prophet ﷺ is saying, stay in this dunya and don't be deceived by it. Even when it is opened for you, then be in it as if you are a stranger or somebody that is passing by. They can give you millions and millions to take what you need and keep moving. Seeking that Akhirah. Because once you lose this as a motto, once you start trusting the morning and the evening and the health and the wealth, and you start trusting into the dunya, you will lose and you will become distracted, and this is the biggest danger that the dunya can have. Hadith number 41, and Ibn Rajab, Hadith Arba'in Nawawi is actually 42 hadith. So we have 41 and 42 left from the actual book itself. And then Ibn Rajab himself, rahimahullah, added 8 more hadith from himself, very small ones, which bi'idhnillah we will cover next week, and next week will be our last sitting in this amazing collection of hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. I ask Allah to make them beneficial for us all and for the ummah, and give us the ability to act upon the wahi that Allah has given to the Rasul, and that He takes us in a state which He is pleased with us and not angered with us, and that He has told us and our family members to enter into His Jannah with His pleasure and far away from His fire and His anger. هذا والله أعلم وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاك الله خير. Any questions? So I think next week Salat al-Isha will be at 6:45.